Gentlemen, hello. How's it going?
Hello. I'm doing well.
Or,
How
sh
are you?
or should I say hoorah?
Hoorah.
Hoorah. Dig it.
Hoorah. Hey, today's it's a good day. So this will come out on Veterans Day, right?
That's right.
And we are recording on Election Day. And I think it's very appropriate that the three of us obviously spent quite a few years in the service, gave a good portion of our lives to serving this amazing country. And I'll tell you, for me, it's a special day. I mean, election day is an amazing opportunity for an expression of the things that we hold dear and defend, regardless of what way it goes. The fact that we do it, I just want to acknowledge that, man. I love this country. I love its service members and the fact that we have a place that we call home and that we're willing to give our lives to defend, to do something like what today's all about, the election day, democracy. It's pretty cool. So thank you for joining us today, Garrett. No
I'm
pressure.
excited
You
to
just
be
have to
here.
make this an amazing, for the nation, an amazing podcast, for
All right.
300 million listeners. Yeah, this is your day to
It
shine.
sounds good. I dig it. So it'll be my goal to make this the best podcast that you've had yet, and
Ever.
we'll see how that unfolds.
And when David says like the 300 million listeners, subscribers, he really means his mom, my mom, and like maybe one other friend of ours that like really likes us. So
Hey, you got to
Yeah,
start
yeah.
somewhere.
got to start somewhere.
I'll get my
Uh,
mom to join the group too, so we'll have one more.
yes.
That's great.
Nice,
That's
man.
great.
Nice. But will she subscribe and will she listen to future episodes past your episode? That's the real
It's a
question.
good, yeah, good chance of it.
Well, good, man. Well, hey, Garrett, appreciate you coming on the show. Excited about this conversation. We want to highlight kind of what you're up to these days, but let's start with kind of a backstory about who you are and where you came from.
Yeah, so my name's Garret Biss, and I was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware before I joined the Marines. Enlisted in 1999, had an opportunity to go off to college and get a commission after a couple of years in the Marine Corps, and then raised my hand and was fortunate to be selected for the aviation pipeline after commissioning. And then a series of lucky breaks took me to fly the KC-130 Juliet for a couple of years, and then I was offered an early retirement. So that's a little bit of what brought me to it. And actually, when I was contending or considering whether or not to apply for, this early retirement that they were doing for a short period of time, I looked at all the things that I wanted to do in my life, and there was always the excuse that, oh man, if I was in the Marine Corps, I'd go write a book, or I'd do this nonprofit work, or I'd travel to this place, or I'd get involved in this. And when I was offered the chance to retire early, I felt like they were pulling my card. They're like, "All right, you said you're going to do all these things. Now let's see what you're really going to do." So that was a little bit of concurrence for me to take that opportunity and move on to and invest everything I'd experienced up until that point into some other endeavors and other interests and passions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think yeah, and I want to. I'm assuming that the transition just wasn't that simple based on the
Oh, it
TED,
was
your
easy, man.
awesome TED talk and the things that you're doing. But yeah, I mean, it was that easy, right? Like, hey, thank you, Marine Corps. Heading out, and I'm gonna go do all these great things, and it's just gonna be an easy transition. I mean, that's what you experienced, right? Because that's exactly
That's
what I
that's what I thought,
experienced.
right? Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, actually, when I came to this conclusion or made the decision that I was going to give up the opportunity to fly for a couple more years. I remember standing on the side of the flight line, watching the C-130s in the pattern, and really so much sadness bubbled up inside of me, realizing what I was potentially giving up. But I also realized that, and this sounds kind of weird, but I love flying so much. I love being in that aircraft. I love working with other Marines so much that in this strange kind of way, I realized it was similar to any other indulgence that we might have in our life that is pre preventing us from or becoming this obstacle to doing some other things. I knew I had some big passions in my life, a lot of ambitious things that I wanted to pursue. And I realized, all right, if I get 4 more years of my life doing this thing, which really isn't helping me progress on any of these other goals or these ambitions I had outside of the military, that it was just another indulgence in a way. I mean, I loved it so much and I got a lot of joy from it, but it wasn't setting me up for other things that I wanted to pursue, which is something I think we all have to contend with at different times is distractions and other things come up in our life that can be barriers to or preventing us from leaning into the things that really make us feel alive and really help us make a difference.
Yeah, man, that's so true. Well, I want to dive in, man. Let's get into it, the meat of this. So you chose to retire early. And then what? How did that transition go? We were somewhat joking about it to begin the conversation, but I'm assuming it wasn't just some like peachy easy transition for you out, and you talked about going and doing better things. Like what did you go do?
Yeah, so yes, unfortunately, my journey was similar to too many other veterans. And when I separated from the military, when I took that uniform off for the last time, I entered a very dark chapter of my life. A lot of the things that the foundational things that I had known and understood about myself and about the world, all of those things were now having to be redefined. So I lost a really strong foundation, and it really brought up a lot of insecurity and a lot of fears about what life would look like outside the military. Look, when you think about it, most people that join the military are 18, 20, 22 years old. From a developmental perspective, our prefrontal cortex isn't even fully developed yet. Our ability to even perceive who we are, to have that sense of identity, to understand the world, to understand our place in the world, all of that is still being formed as we're wearing that uniform and looking through the lens of military service. So in some ways, I talk about, I think that we have as veterans, when we transition out, we really have another adolescence. There's another period of time where we're being thrust out into a new world, and we have to find and navigate our way. And I was concerned that though I knew I had been successful in the Marine Corps, I knew I'd gotten some promotions, I knew I got good fit reps, I'd done well in certain things. I didn't know if any of that would translate to life outside of the military. So it brought up a lot of concerns. So as I was contending with some of that, also, many things in my life were falling apart, for lack of a better way to say it. My marriage was falling apart. I was having some health challenges, now some financial challenges, with the addition of like, all right, where the hell am I going to get a paycheck next week or next month? Am I going to be able to support, my life and my daughter's life? And all that uncertainty really led me to this constrictive place of fear and really concern and lack of clarity about what those next steps would be. Fortunately for me, I found some coaching and I got connected with a great mentor who helped me deal with some of these things. So, in that position that I was in that darkness, I also noticed that I had this propensity to use some things, some unhealthy habits, some unhealthy behaviors that I'd become accustomed to in the past. I became more reliant on those things, and I quickly realized that I was standing atop a very slippery slope. That some of these things that I was indulging in or engaging in to help deal with that pain that was inside, or that void that was inside, these things are a little too effective at helping us numb out and forget and not think about things that we don't want to think about. And I knew that that was going to lead me to a very rough and challenging place. And at the darkest moment, and as I share in the TEDx talk, the darkest place, I knew that 22 veterans a day were taking their own lives, and I couldn't say with any kind of certainty that I wasn't going to join them. I was, these thoughts that I was having about it began to be a little bit more pervasive, and I got to a place where I asked a good friend of mine who came to visit me. I asked him if he'd take away the firearms from my house because I no longer felt safe being alone in a house in that position, and not knowing if I was going to cross that line, like not being able to say with certainty that I wasn't going to become one of those veterans, really shocked me, I think, and kind of kept me, woke me up a little bit and inspired me to figure out what the heck was going on and find a course or chart another course. So many years later, I reflect back on that experience, and as I was navigating my way out of it, I was always wondering, like, what the heck was this all about? Why are so many veterans feeling similar things to this? What is going on with some of America's best and brightest men and women that are so capable, that are so that have so much impact? They're so good at the things that they do. What is it about this group of individuals that struggles the way that they do when they transition out? So over the years, I began to get more clarity on that, and then ultimately came to this message of this really clear understanding that I share in the TEDx talk of why, like, what happens, what's the foundation that we lose, what are some of the seeds that are planted that create this internal struggle that so many veterans go through as they face that transition and transition out. And one of the things that I really appreciate is that there are certain truths to this transition that military veterans experience that are similar to challenges anybody experiences during a real fundamental shift or transition in their life.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll get into that. You highlight a couple different stats. And first off, thank God that your buddy took your firearms, because what an amazing testament also to self-awareness, and to have the trust to say, hey, like, dude, I need some help. And even if
Mhm.
you highlight in the TED Talk, you didn't necessarily know the reason, but the fact that he was willing to do it, I'm
Right.
guessing, especially if he was a vet, that he probably probably understood to a deeper level of why you were
Mm,
asking. Um, but you highlight, vets are two times more likely to suffer from mental health and addiction, and 57% more likely to commit suicide. I think these things are just stats that we need to be cognizant of. We hear it so much, the 22 number, that I think sometimes we get lost in the just almost callous to the fact, yep, these are just the numbers and this is the data, but there's real lives tied to this, and it's very significant struggles. But I want to dive in. So you highlight three things: connection, authenticity, and meaning. And one of the things that you said that really I hadn't really considered it until listening to your TED talk, and you said that you highlighted the intensity of connection in the military, specifically. We commit to going into battle. Like it's not something I don't think we think about it as I was listening to your talk. I was like, man, I don't know that I actively always thought about it, but I knew I was committed to it. There was never a doubt. The commitment to go into battle with my, shipmates, with my battle buddies, that would never wavered. That was never a question that I would be willing to do that and raise my hand to do that. But also the idea that we're each even willing to sacrifice our life to protect the life of our service members, of our mates, right?
right. Right.
And I think when you talked about that, I was like, man, that is intense. Like that level of connection, that level of whatever you want to call it, love, friendship, the depth of that relationship
Mhm.
is truly something that I never consciously considered that part of my relationships going away. That level of commitment. And so when you highlight that, I was like, man, this is a pretty fascinating thing that I think we should spend more time in, that we should dive more
Mhm.
deeply into and say, okay, let's just acknowledge I had relationships where I was fully committed, no matter what, that I would go into battle with you and ultimately be willing to sacrifice my life. That is now gone. How
Right.
did you personally work through that aspect of connection? How are you able to, I don't want to say replicate or replace it necessarily, but how are you able to satisfy that need that I imagine to become a commitment for a significant period of your adult life?
Yeah, so great question. So talking about the scope of suffering, so you highlighted some of those the statistics. And when I think about that, like those are statistics that are a snapshot at the end of the spectrum, but it doesn't represent or adequately capture the amount of suffering and disconnect that so many veterans feel that don't get clinically diagnosable conditions or don't
That's a great
ultimately,
point.
suffer or sacrifice. And that's something that I've become more aware of and really has inspired a new passion for me to help those millions of other veterans who they leave the military, they go get a job, maybe they're, from their bank account, it looks like they're doing well and everything's aligning in their life, but they're still suffering from these same things, that lack of connection, the lack of authenticity, that change of their identity, and the loss or the transition of that sense of meaning in their life. And when we think about the scope of it, that's something that it's, again, we take America's best and brightest and most capable men and women that are willing to do extraordinary things, and if they're not engaged in the same way or have the opportunity in the same way, then for one, the whole world suffers, the whole country suffers because they're not able to make that same level of contribution. I've talked with a lot of veterans that go out and they get a good job and they're making a decent paycheck, but they're like, man, I used to be a chief in the Navy and I was responsible for all of these things. And now I'm responsible for making PowerPoint presentations look prettier or organizing a birthday party for somebody at the office. And it's like, there's just some level of disconnect there. And that can fuel a lot of shame or a lot of just questioning of what our identity is and what the value is that we provide. As far as that level of connection, again, we're experiencing this as our prefrontal cortex is forming, as our brain is developing, as we're learning about the world, what the world is, what our place is in the world. And this is what I think is very disheartening or challenging for veterans as they transition out, because this whole world that we know is just what we know at the time through military service. And we don't realize some of these things that we might take for granted or really just not understand that this isn't normal to have this level of connection and devotion to others. And yes, this can be times that we're going into combat or times that we're willing to go on deployments or do very difficult and hard training evolutions with those people that we're serving with. But it's also just a part of our culture. If we know somebody gets picked up for a working party and it's going to be a crappy time and they're going to be uncomfortable and they're going to suffer, we lean into that. Hey, man, I'm going to suffer there with you. Like there's so much that like joy that comes from that and really fosters and strengthens this bond or this level of connection that we have. So when we transition out of the military, for many, it leaves a void inside. And for me, I didn't understand what that was. I felt displaced. I felt alone. I felt I'd lost a sense of belonging. It didn't really make sense to me because like I'm still surrounded by people. I still live in a community. There's still people I talk with, but something is missing. Something's not the same. So one of the things that I learned through working with my mentor and some of the coaching that I did was the importance of first and foremost reconnecting with ourselves. So when we lose that sense of connection, but we do it at a time where we also lose this permission to show up and be authentic or experience this positive self-identity, we've lost the connection. And then in many ways, or sometimes we lose our sense of worth and our sense of deserving of connection, which can really be challenging and be a huge obstacle to helping us foster that new sense of connection. So first and foremost, my journey and what I encourage a lot of other individuals, first reconnect with yourself. Now that you've taken off that uniform, who are you? What are those the same strengths and the wins that you've had in your life? What are the strengths that you exhibit as an individual without outside of this context of the value that you provided in the military, but now you as a human being, you as a man, what is this value that you still have? Because if we can't reconnect with that, then we don't feel great about ourselves when we're showing up trying to foster new connections. So first and foremost, we need to connect with the true worth and value that we have. And there's many, simple ways to do that and processes to do that. But that's really where it all begins. Because once we reconnect with that, once we reestablish our own positive identity and have this confidence and this knowing in our self-worth that we are deserving of connections, that's really where it starts. And then to carry that forward and to start fostering those connections with others, I love the advice or the saying by Mahatma Gandhi, be the change that you want to see in the world. And I think this is what relates to those connections that we can foster. If you want this connection, if you want to foster connections with individuals that will willingly go into the suffering with you, that will show up for you in those bad times and be there with you and provide that foundation for you, then demonstrate your willingness to do that for others. First be that change that you want to see in the world, be that friend that you want to see in the world, and offer those connections to others that you want to experience in your life.
Yeah, that's so good, man. We a lot of the guys in our group we talk about this exact thing is like, hey, be the weird one. Like be the dude that like randomly says hello to a stranger, says hello to a dad
Right.
at the park, be the one that like makes the invite, right? Because there's
Yeah.
so many people that aren't going to be the one that makes the invite. Create the space, create the opportunity. Just say hello, right? Be the one that's just okay with maybe you might get rejected,
Right.
maybe, right? But like be the one that goes into that and is the one that makes the invite. I love that, man.
Certainly. And we live in such a time where everybody is yearning for and starving for more connection, for starving to
Totally.
be seen. And here's the opposite side of that. If you don't say hello to the stranger that you're there, if you don't offer a cordial and friendly conversation with the person that's checking you out at the register or the person that you walk past on the street, if you're not offering that positive connection, then honestly, you're offering them another imprint of rejection. Because here you are, I'm a human being. I just passed another human being. We experienced this place and time together, and I wasn't worth them even acknowledging my presence. So not only is it a beautiful thing when we can lean into that and we can offer that affirmation or that encouragement or just the acknowledgement of somebody else, but if we're not doing that, then we're really just feeding into this culture that we're experiencing where there's so much disconnection and people can't even have these human exchanges and feel their own importance just through their own interactions.
Yeah, man. And then we lose our authenticity, which is exactly you talk about.
Hmm.
That it's interesting, as I'm thinking back through my own experience in the military and to David's point that we started, like today's election day, right? Like there's,
Yeah.
man, this country is very, very divided right now, and our military is very diverse, right? Like there's lots of different beliefs and religions and
Mhm.
cultures and values, but because of the connection, because of that mission, because of the meaning and purpose, it's okay to be authentic and like believe in one side, be a Democrat or
Mhm.
a Republican, a Christian or a Hindu or a Muslim. Like it's okay. And we all come together and we
Right.
love each other. But again, as soon as you leave that, right?
Mhm.
As soon as you leave that, this country is very divided and it pulls you apart.
Right.
There's a lot of fighting right now going on because of being either red or blue, right? Christian
Mhm.
or Muslim, like whatever that is. And so you talk about we put on these masks and we just like work in this environment and we hold our own opinions to ourselves. We don't talk about it, or we just get really, really angry about it. Either way. So how do we get out of this as a country? Like not even
Mhm.
like as an individual, but like how do we take these masks off and become more authentic?
No, it's a beautiful question. Always starting with the positive. So I think it's our natural behavior and it's a natural tendency. There's a lot of things that are hardwired into our body and really are represented in normal human behaviors that come from a position of self-preservation. So it's very common to think about the mistakes that we've made, things that we wish we'd have done differently, things that we said that maybe we shouldn't have said, ways that we didn't show up that we wish we would have changed in the past. It's common to, if you will, kind of keep all of these tabs open in our conscious awareness because this is a with the intent of trying to preserve ourselves. Because if we continue to make those same mistakes, then that could threaten our, our future connections, our future well-being. Unfortunately, it doesn't make us feel good if all we're thinking about is those negative things. It doesn't stir up the best emotions. It doesn't give us that confidence to lean into things. Because no matter how many mistakes you've made in the past, there's still many good things that you've done. And if we can reconnect with that, a win that I had yesterday is not going to be a threat to me tomorrow. So very quickly, we can have this tendency to forget about it or minimize it, or it leaves our consciousness, our conscious awareness. So with some intention, we can bring our focus back to those good things. And I think this is true for all of the relationships and the connection that we want to foster in our community and throughout our country. Yes, there might be a short list of ideas and of worries and concerns that divide us. But no matter how many lists, how many long lists of these talking points that we get so wrapped up in, there's many more things that unite us together as a humanity. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to make an impact. Everybody wants to be thought well of by other people. Everybody who's a parent wants to be a good parent and allow their children to have a better life experience than they did. Everybody has, fear of rejection. Everybody feels worried about things. Everybody stresses over things. These are all common human emotions that we all share. And if we could focus more on those things that unite us or that tie us together, then it would create a much better place for us to operate from and give us a foundation with which we could all march together and worry about those things that we all want that will help our families, our communities, and certainly our country do a better place. You touched on authenticity, and this is a big thing that challenges is that. So I understand connection as an invitation to be a part of a tribe. As tribal creatures, we all need to foster connections. We need to have other people. We do our best when we're part of a group. It's also ingrained in us. It's hardwired into our bodies. So our ability to emotionally regulate, a lot of our ability to do that is fostered by or empowered by the connections that we have. The oxytocin that we feel when we come together in a group or when we share an experience with a friend, our body releases oxytocin. And this is one of the ways that we reduce or mitigate the negative effects of stress, the cortisol and the adrenaline that are flowing through us. This is one of the reasons that, military members can go forward and serve on the battlefield together because, yes, there is this adrenaline. Yes, there is this cortisol. There's all of these things that can create or stimulate fear in our bodies. But when we do it together, we have this bond that allows us that extra power to kind of go forward and do difficult things. The challenge is if we don't feel, so connection being that permission to be part of a group or a tribe, authenticity is our permission to be a part of that tribe, to be acceptable just as we are, to say what we think, to ask for what we need, to share how we feel, and not worry that it's going to cost us our connections. And if we're ever in a situation or we have an experience where we're afraid, oh, if I say this thing, if I tell somebody what I'm actually thinking, if I tell somebody, if I ask for what I need, right now I need a buddy, right now I need somebody to sit with me in this dark place. We're afraid that if we express these things that we truly need, maybe people will think differently of us. Maybe we're going to be outcasts. Maybe, we'll lose some business opportunity, whatever that is. The challenge is when we don't have that permission to be authentic, many times we'll put on a mask or we'll show up as a version of ourselves so that we can maintain that connection or we can get that external validation. The problem is if people are connecting with that mask, they're not connecting with us. So we don't get these benefits, this oxytocin release. We don't get these benefits. We don't get the nurturing experience from these connections. Instead, we get fear that what if they find out what I really think? What if they find out what I'm hiding? What if they find out what I did in my past that I'm so afraid for other people to know about? So instead of this nurturing or instead of this empowering emotion, we're wrapped up in fear. And when we're in that fear state, it's not allowing us to show up as our best self. It's not allowing us to make that contribution that we want to make or make that impact that we want to make.
Yeah, actually, that was I have it starred in my notes when I was watching your video, specifically your comment about without authenticity, we wear masks and people then connect with our masks, not they connect with my mask, not me. And I think that
Right.
is such a critical point because a lot of us can even feel like we have a bunch of friends. There are a lot of people, and someone can look at our lives externally and be like, "Well, dude, you're hanging out with so and so, you got this, that, you got all these friends, whatever." But there's a very real chance because of this fear that you're talking about, because of this mask, that you have no connections, that
Right.
you have nobody who you feel safe around. And that really made an impact on me. And then there was a quote I think it was Rita Mae Brown. You said the reward for conformity is that everyone likes us except for ourselves. I just thought that was so powerful in the sense of the outward appearance can be something, but without that authenticity, there's really you may be in a hole. You may be a negative,
Mhm.
right? You may be a
Right.
net negative, and I think it's critical. And I also want to highlight uh in your TED talk, you can grow about 10,000% of the facial hair that I can grow. So I know you were disparaging on your mask, the beard mask.
Yeah.
But it's you're doing better than I am in that front. But to your point, I had to chuckle because what do military dudes like everybody gets out and they grow these big beards.
Right.
And you just highlight the mask and that's no kidding, just a visual mask that we'll sometimes wear to fit in. And even
Mhm.
and I think today, Stu and I were talking about how we voted, and we vote differently. Generally speaking, we vote very differently.
Mhm.
Um, but it's interesting how folks they can't even discuss these decisions that they make in just a peaceful, critical thought way with reason behind it. There's this fear like, oh,
Mm.
what's this person gonna think? And I don't really care what Stu thinks, so like I'll tell him all day. But ultimately it just is it's such a fascinating display of this fear that we live in. And at the end of the day, if you thoughtfully consider something and in our case prayerfully considered it, then what's there to be afraid of, right? Like just
Right.
be who you are. But it's hard. It's really hard. Something that helps us get through that as well, and to your third point, is meaning. And I thought that the way you describe it, the sense of meaning allows us to endure the suffering. I
Mm.
really, really appreciate how how you frame that, because if we it really gives us permission. If we find the thing that gives us meaning, then everything else falls into place from the perspective of not living in fear. It helps us to get through the suffering. It helps us to be authentic. It helps us to make connections. And so just talk about that for a sec, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so this is something I learned from Dr. Viktor Frankl's work. And if you're not familiar, he's a Holocaust survivor. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And it was almost like a footnote or just like a small point in there. But I read it, I was like, man, the ability, that sense of meaning in our life provides our capacity to endure suffering. And it's so true, those times that we are engaged in something that have so much meaning, even if it's just a project that we're working on, but there's such meaning tied to it, then we can get up and we can get out of bed early and we can do, work late hours and we can endure those challenging times. If we look back in the military service, those long deployments, those harsh training environments, we had such a sense of meaning tied to it at many levels, but that sense of meaning is what provided us that capacity. If you're caring for a loved one, if you got a small child that, a newborn that's waking up all night, you have the ability to lean into that because there's so much meaning tied to how important that is in your life. Well, if your sense of meaning comes from that uniform that you wear, or the position that you have, and you lose that or that's taken away from you, now you've lost that sense of capacity to endure suffering. Life's going to go on. There's always going to be challenging times. Look through the lens of a veteran's life that is really suffering or struggling in a dark place. That sense of meaning that they had to put that uniform on and just kind of lean into it, or grab that straw and just suck up the discomfort and lean into it, that's taken away. So now there's this suffering that doesn't have a sense of meaning tied to it. So we really lose that capacity. The same hard thoughts are going to come up. The same sense of loneliness might come up. The same challenges that we're facing, the tiredness, the soreness, that's still going to come up because life goes on. But if you don't have some kind of sense of meaning to help pull you through that, then you can really be floundering in a bad place.
Yeah, and I look at Stu and my relationship similarly in that, the meaning behind connection, the meaning behind
Mm,
friendship, the meaning to love another dude and move forward really helps me with the suffering of being his friend. Right? Like it's just he's a hard dude to get along with. He's a hard dude to
yeah,
tolerate. So the suffering of that is really pushed forward by the meaningfulness of
yeah.
our relationship. So Stu, I love you. But one thing you did say before, Stu, I know you have a great question. I love how you this word picture. What was a word picture to me? You said, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm saying it less eloquently than you are, but we fight for the love of what's behind us,
Mm,
not for the hate of what's in front of us. It's
mm,
when you describe that, I was like, man, I love that descriptor because I think a lot of people, when they consider warfare and fighting and going into battle, man, you must hate the enemy. And I never felt, I mean, of course, there were times where bad things happened to people that you really care about. But I honestly I can never remember a time where I was like, I hate the enemy. I hate the enemy.
right.
And that actually drove me towards action. I don't recall a single time, but I do remember multiple instances where, hey, I love whether it's love for country, whether it's and usually I don't even think it was love for country. I think it was love for the guys and gals that were with me,
Right.
that were next to me. And that love really drove exceptional action across the
Mm,
board, right? And so I appreciate you highlighting that because I think a lot of people, especially those who haven't been in combat, they don't really I think there's a misperception of what war is really about. And there's a lot of
right.
love
It's not all
in war.
anger and hatred and
Right.
bravado and just trying
No,
to decimate other people. It's thinking about those that are behind us
that's
and
right.
what that
That's
means.
right. That was great.
Well, on that point, so one of the things that that I was thinking about or contemplating, I guess, when I was in Afghanistan and probably leading up to that too, was this idea of going forward and fighting an enemy and trying to understand why that enemy wants to fight us. I mean, a lot of, there can be a lot of uncertainty there. It's really strange that humans can be the same species, the same DNA, the same blood in our bodies, but have such adversarial positions against one another. So when I really started to think about that, what the conclusion that I came to, and some people share this, but the conclusion that I came to is I believe that if I was born in anybody else's circumstances and experienced everything in life that they'd experienced, been exposed to the same things, experienced the same hardships, that I would be much more similar to that individual and I would have much more similar belief system and value system to that individual than to my own. And this is something that's helped me connect with anybody, regardless of how different we might be, whether it's somebody who has different political beliefs or different ideologies or different values. I see them and I think, if I'd experienced the things that they'd experienced, or if I'd learned the things that they'd experienced, or been through some of those same circumstances, that I would be much more similar to them. And this is something that helps me foster that understanding and that connection. So especially, in a time where there's so much divide in our country, again, this comes back to let's look at those things that we have similar. All of the beliefs and values that we have, those weren't, we weren't endowed with those when we were born. These are things that we developed through the experiences that we've had and through the things that we've been introduced to along the way. And I've been fortunate enough to have some very strong beliefs on some, core fundamental issues that have changed. I've made 180-degree shifts over my life. So that's also really helped reinforce that perspective that, it's the experiences that we have and the conclusions that we come to about what those experiences mean in our life that help us form the values and the belief system that we have.
Well, yeah, we have a challenge in the Kinetic Man, Stu, real quick, that go find somebody who you perceive to be so different than you. And in my, example for me, I didn't find this person, but she was brought into my life by the
Hmm.
military. So I worked for a black woman before I took command. She was the CO, I was the XO. And I learned from the foundation of what we had in common, being parents and the things that we were striving for in our careers, our military, for our family, all the things, the
Hmm.
shared love of country, all the things we had in common. I learned so much about her. I mean, she's a black woman who has experiences based on just that. And I learned
Right.
so much. And I think it's a beautiful place to be to like I would love for people to have open dialogue on why they voted, how they voted. Because
Right.
then you could be like, you really voted for that person? Wow, like tell me
Hmm.
about that. Instead of I hate you because you voted for them. No, no, like why'd
Hmm.
you tell? And you could learn something that you didn't know. And often, and I love what you just said, we often realize how wrong we are about so many things. I would argue if you put a percentage to it, I would argue we're wrong about 90% of the time. Probably north of 90%, in all honesty.
Right.
And
Yeah.
until you challenge some
Maybe
of your
95 for
deep,
you.
I would
Maybe
say that I'm
98.
closer to a 98% like
Yeah.
wrong. But when you challenge those things and go deeper into each of those topics, if you're willing to do that critically, then you can really grow. And it's a
Mm.
beautiful place to be, especially from a place of commonality, right?
And I think that we all have this awareness inside of us, whether we're conscious of it or not. We have this awareness that we're probably wrong more times than we're not. And one thing I heard before, I'm sorry, I don't recall who said this, but something that I've learned and really understand about human nature is a lot of times the things that we judge in other individuals are really insecurities or things that we judge in ourselves, things that we're not 100% certain about. And I think this is something that's fueling this divisiveness and all this anger is okay, you have this opposing belief system or you voted for this other person. I'm just going to immediately reject you because I don't want to investigate my own beliefs and how I came to my own conclusions. And maybe there's a crack in the foundation there that I don't really want to investigate. So I'm just going to throw everything about you out so that I don't have to go, be introspective and investigate things. But if we can move beyond that, if we could have some open dialogues and hey, tell me about this path that you took through your life that brought you to this place where you have this certain belief or this certain view, then that would be a path to healing if we could journey that together.
So everything that we've said so far um, is not talked about much in transition from any source. The official transition assistance program.
Great
Lots of
program, by the way.
yeah, yeah.
If you
But
can't see my face, I'm saying that in jest.
yeah, yeah. And so to the point, your point, like it's so much focused on what's the next paycheck, right? Like, you're getting they talk a little bit about like finding your strengths, but it's finding your strengths in the form of like what job are you going to take, right? And
Right.
getting your resume all set up and doing interviews and preparing and all this stuff. And that's where everyone's focus is. Everyone transition out of the military is where's the next paycheck coming from?
And we take so much for granted. I mean, it's just the things that we talked about today, all that's taken for granted and really skipped over or glossed over. And that's what's leading so many veterans to the really dark place. And unfortunately, we're seeing the statistics continue to go up. 22 is a number that was shared before. I'm seeing that as high as 40 or 44 with some recent reports. I mean, that's excruciatingly painful for us as a community. And I also know that there's, again, as I said, that's the tip of the spear. That's the far end of the spectrum. What about everybody else that just doesn't feel connected, doesn't feel that life of meaning? I know a lot of the work that you guys do with gentlemen is about trying to bring you back to living that version of your life that you want to live. And I think a lot of it comes down to this foundation and that was really the mission behind my TEDx talk, looking at everything that I got and didn't get from that transition assistance program. There was no mention of, oh, here's some mental health challenges. Here's some emotions that are going to come up for you. These are some things that you're going to face because of this loss of meaning or identity that you've carried with you your entire adult life. None of that was represented. The only thing I think that they said was, hey, don't drink too much. Veterans tend to do that when they transition out. But
Yeah.
beyond that, that was like the only mental health advice or related advice that we got. So that was a mission with my TEDx talk. There's so many veterans that struggle. And not that listening to a 10-minute talk is going to help ease all of that, but I at least want to plant a seed of understanding. So veterans that are in that place, the hardest thing for me was to be in a bad place and not have any understanding or comprehension of what was going on or how I got there. Because if you can't understand how you got there, it's really hard to have hope that things are going to get better, or that you can move beyond that. So that was my mission with the TEDx talk. And for anybody who wants to check it out, it's called The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face, or you can simply go to unspokentrauma.vet and check it out. And I encourage you to please share that with any veterans or anybody who loves a veteran if you want to better understand what that challenge and that transition looks like.
Yeah, man. And we'll put that link in the show notes for sure. It's a really good talk. I still don't think that we are going to solve the problem of, and it's not a problem per se, but like military transitioning out, like their first focus is going to be where's the next paycheck coming from, right?
Right.
And they're probably, unless they like kind of go the entrepreneur route and start their own thing, they're probably going to get into a job that they're going to change at some point pretty quickly. Um, so how do we, we're hoping the veterans listen to this. We're hoping that they watch your TED talk and understand this stuff and learn and go do some self-reflection. But how do we help corporate America? How do we help, the Fortune 500 businesses that are hiring these veterans as employees, middle management? How do we get to corporate America and tell them, hey, here's some things that you can do to make the veterans transition better for them and ultimately better for you and your corporation as well?
Right. That's the question I'm trying to answer right now. So if anybody
Mm.
works with a veteran ERG or you're in the corporate space and you have a lot of veterans with the company that you work for, that's my next step is I want to take a lot of what I've learned in the mental health and addiction recovery field and all of this, just this realization about a lot of the root challenges that veterans face and help them overcome that. So any programming that you can offer to help veterans better understand these challenges. I mean, I haven't talked to a veteran yet that they're like, that say that my talk didn't resonate with them 100% because they experienced some version of that. So help veterans better understand this and then start to reconnect with. We have this natural tendency for these negative emotions or these limiting thoughts to come up. These fears or these worries about all the negative things about us. And if we can help mitigate that and remind veterans of the true value and the worth that they have, then they can bring those strengths and they can bring that capacity to bear for the community and for the organizations. And that's what my mission is now is I want to help veterans better experience their life and live a greater reflection of their life of what they want it to be. Remember the strength that they have so they can bring that to the companies. And when I go in and work with companies to do this, obviously the impact of their veteran talent is going to drastically increase, which is going to benefit the entire corporation. But yeah, we look at some of the statistics of turnover. About 60% of veterans will leave their first job within a year, about 90% within 2 years. And I think that's because so many veterans are dealing with or trying to contend with a lot of these emotional and mental health challenges and coming to the conclusion that, oh, maybe I need a different job or maybe I need to move to a different place. And that's going to fill this void because they don't really understand where that void's coming from. So I want to help veterans better understand that so we can fill that void and we can reconnect them with their true worth and their true value. And then if they want to lean into and make a greater impact at the organization that they're at, then that's beautiful and that's a great thing to serve everybody.
Yeah, that's you touch on the importance of uh more meaningful, depthful relationships than work, money, whatever, and really
Hmm.
seeking, hey, who am I? What are my passions? Let me seek a vocation. What's my calling? And I'm a
Right.
big believer, hey, seek Jesus too, right? Like that is, having a spiritual foundation and having because there's community, not
Hmm.
just in that, but there's community in, whether you plug into the church or whatever, there's so many places that we have to really potentially step out of our comfort zone to
Mm.
seek to get back into connection and move beyond the superficial, right, into things that are going to make a lasting impact and really address, as you highlight, really address the voids that we're experiencing. Because Stu and I mean, that was something we talk about often. I never anticipated having identity crisis issues or when I moved out of when I left the military, but man, I experienced things that I'd never experienced in the military, like I started having weird heart feelings and anxiety and these things, and we had to dig into it. And at one point, I remember, I mean, it was it was probably a year out, so probably a year ago, maybe a little more. I walked into Stu's office, which was right next door, and I was like, dude, like, am I having a heart attack? Like, this is a really weird thing. Never experienced anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And I put a little bit of joke into it, like, hey, we probably should get our businesses in order because I don't know what this is gonna look like. But
Right.
ultimately, I think, and I want to leave us with what do you practically do? And I love that you ended with three points. You said be the connection, excuse me. So be the one that actually you may be the one that has to step out and make the effort, express your truth and really what I wrote is acknowledge what you've done in the military. Like acknowledge it and use it. Don't be like, okay, that was a chapter. This book is done now. No, like bring those experiences in,
Hmm.
acknowledge that truth and use it. And then seek more joy. I love that one, right? Seek more joy. Find ways to serve, like find ways to, back to the purpose and the meaning and understanding who I am and what brings me joy, and then lean into that, right? But
Right.
step one is really, and oftentimes the community can really challenge us to find those
Hmm.
to pour jet fuel on that process and accelerate it. Like, hey, who am I? Like, hey, you speak life into me. Like, who do you see that I am? And like Stu, he spoke life into me. He was like, hey, dude, you're super handsome and you probably could pursue modeling, but maybe let's do some real
I
estate
didn't
stuff. And I was like,
I
thank
didn't
you,
say that.
Stu. I appreciate you acknowledging these things that I sensed, but I
Never
didn't
came out
know.
of my mouth.
No, no, that's true. You said don't. You don't have to be. I mean, don't, dude. We're
Now,
friends here.
I challenge you to make a deep fake video of him saying that, and then you can just
Yeah,
play it over and over for your
yeah,
morning
exactly.
affirmations.
There you go.
So you mentioned leaning out of your comfort zone, and the as you were saying that, this first time this thought came to me is I would encourage people to lean into their comfort zone because you get into a place where you are uncomfortable. You're suffering from those loss of connections, that loss of meaning, and this is a very, dark place to be. Where do we lean into our comfort zone? We're more comfortable when we have those connections, when we're surrounded by other people that support us, that get us. We're more comfortable when we are more authentic, and we know that the connections that we have are genuine and authentic. And then we're more comfortable when we have that sense of meaning in our life. And it's that sense of meaning is not coming from just bank accounts, increasing and paychecks getting bigger and faster cars and fancier houses. That joy and that sense of meaning comes from engaging in something that's meaningful to us and finding more times to do that. And for some people, the best combinations when your vocation and your sense of meaning all kind of tie together. But if that's not for you, then find other ways to fill that meaning cup outside of your work so that you can still experience those benefits from it. One thing I hear a lot from veterans is they say, "Man, I just feel more comfortable being alone." And what this tells me is that maybe they feel more comfortable being alone, so they isolate and they spend a lot of time by themselves. But that's because it feels better than the awkwardness of these inauthentic connections and this fear of being judged. The best place to be is experiencing those nurturing connections. So for those individuals that they say, "Man, I'm just happier being alone. I'd rather just stay in my house. I can't deal with all of that stuff out there." It's okay. Well, the best state to get to is creating those real connections out there that you need, not just running away from the bad ones. So leaning into that comfort zone. Where do we feel most comfortable? When we have connection, when we're authentic, we're showing up as our true self, and we have a strong sense of meaning in that guiding star in our life.
So good, man. Well, yeah, and COVID exacerbated the challenge of, being on Zoom all day long, being in your house all day
Right.
long, remote work, all this stuff. It's challenging for sure. With just a few minutes.
Unfortunately, we called it social distancing, not physical distancing, and
Yeah,
everybody took it to heart and they thought, they need to socially distance, which, yeah, and I'm worried about what that's going to do for our generation and in the next generation. We look at children that were developed that have delayed communication skills or really inhibited communication skills.
everybody's on
That's
this, the
that's
phone.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you read Anxiety Generation from Jonathan Haidt?
I haven't yet, but I've got it on my Amazon shopping cart
Yeah,
list.
man. It's crazy, man. Well, hey, with just a few minutes left, let's talk about Valiant Path real fast. Give some plug for that.
Yeah, so Valiant Path is a coaching program and a curriculum that I developed, and it really stems from my work working with individuals in addiction recovery. So people that have started a path to recovery, and for somebody that struggled with an addictive substance or behavior, really that recovery begins when they decide I'm going to take control and I'm going to take positive action to make my life get to a better place or allow my life to get to a better place. And this coaching program mirrors a lot of the stuff that I was introduced to in my life and my path out of the darkness. It leverages a lot of applied positive psychology and some of the science of human flourishing to regain, some of those things that we've lost to help fill the void. A lot of people that have suffered with a substance or behavior in the past, they remove that substance or behavior and they're like, all right, that was a win. And now I'm going to go do other things. But what they don't do is ever fill that void. And if you just remove something and you create a vacuum, it's only a matter of time before something or many other things kind of come in and replace that void. And we want to be in control of that. We want to have some intention on what we're filling that void with, not just allowing the next numbing behavior to kind of come along and take ownership of our life. So that's really what the program's designed is to help individuals take ownership of their recovery and lean into with some intention and get back to that place that they want to be.
Awesome work, my man. I love it. I love it. I am extremely grateful for you going on this journey, but also capturing it, right? Being so intentional about how difficult the transition was and what it, quite frankly, how traumatic it is, and really being blessed enough to organize it in a way that you can express it to others. I mean, it's a powerful 10-minute TED talk. Like I said, I have a full page of digital notes just on some things that I had not considered or thought about before. And I'll
Mm.
tell you that'll have a lasting impact. And so I encourage everybody to go, dedicate 10 minutes to watching it just to there's things that there's nuance to it that will speak to every single vet, right? Because I am fully 1000% convinced that we all go through different levels of trauma just in the not even to acknowledge what potentially happened in the service, and if you were had combat deployments or whatever kind of deployment you had or whatever happened in the military, but that transition is no joke. I mean, it is
Mm,
absolutely no joke. And every vet I've talked to goes, and this is not a rank based thing. I talked to an admiral, a 4-star admiral that I'd worked for when he was a 1-star, in front of a Navy lodge, and it was the same type of
right.
conversation. It was canvassed a little bit differently because we expect from ourselves and our leaders to
Right.
deal with it differently. It's no different, right? It's
Mm,
it's potentially even more exacerbated the longer time you spent, the more
right.
people you had to serve at higher levels. So
And it comes
this
back to
is
human
something
experience. Yeah, we have
100%.
basic fundamental human needs. When we lose the way that we've met those needs over a number of years, then we're going to suffer challenges from it.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you, Garrett, for what you're doing, man. It's making a huge impact in a community that I think we all love dearly.
Yeah, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for this opportunity to come on and share a message. I really appreciate you guys.
Gary, man, we'll put your TED Talk in the show notes. Where else can we send people to put in the show notes for them to find out more about you?
Yeah, you can drop Valiant Path on there, and then I'd highly encourage anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. So I've the last couple of years I've done a lot of work with mental health professionals, helping them better understand the veteran population. So if you're a mental health professional, if you're looking for some CEs or you want to help, have a conversation with your group, please invite me in, and I'm happy to share what I know to help you better serve the veteran population. Any veterans, please go watch that TEDx talk, share it with any veterans that you know. For every veteran, they're going to go to a dark place. It's going to look different for everybody. But anything that we can do to help veterans better understand that journey and more importantly, the way beyond it is going to be a huge help for all of us and our entire nation. And then, yeah, so LinkedIn, the Valiant Path, and then unspoken trauma.vet.
Awesome, man. We'll put all this in the show notes. Guys and gals, check out what Garrett's doing. Like we said, go watch the TED Talk. For all of the men and women that have served and are still serving, thank you very much, and happy Veterans Day. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you.
See you guys.